Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, and members of ADI. I am Paola Barberino, the CEO of Alzheimer's Disease International, and here with me are the wonderful panelists for the panel we're having today, which we are delighted to announce is the launch of the World Alzheimer's Report 2025. As you all know, the launch of a World Alzheimer Report is a big deal in our community. And this year we are delighted that we have as a topic rehabilitation. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. Before that, I give my special thanks to a number of the sponsors that you can see here on the slide. And in particular, some of you like AbbVie, Biogen, Bristol Myers Squibb, Eisai, Johnson & Johnson, Lilly, the Mary Oakley Foundation have been helping this year in particular on this particular event. Thank you so much. Now, next slide, please. Now, just a little discourse on the impact of your funding. I've just shown a slide with all of our funders, but just to let you know that because we've had so many funding for this event, we have been able to give 10 bursary for World Alzheimer's Month this year, and that has enabled our members to partake in more activities than usual. These bursaries are critical to deploy some local awareness raising campaign, and you can see in the picture St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and you can see some organization activity in Madagascar, something from Thailand. Next slide, please. Something from Thailand and something from Brazil. For example, Iran. And we got, I think, another slide with some more of these activities. Ukraine and Zambia and Zimbabwe, for example. And there's been, of course, a lot more as part of World Alzheimer's Month. But this association in particular couldn't have done what they have done without your help. So thank you so much for that. Okay, so ADI was established in 1984. We are the umbrella organization of 105 Alzheimer's and Dementia Associations around the world. We represent our members at the WHO and the UN. We will be there next week. If you haven't registered for that event, please do. OECD, G7, G20, and other global and regional bodies. But also, and this is why so many of you know about us, we promote World Alzheimer's Month and World Alzheimer's Day, and we publish the World Alzheimer's Report together with other reports. And this is what we are going to speak about today. Our motto is that we are looking about inclusion and care whilst we are waiting for a cure that hopefully will come tomorrow, but is not quite there yet. And that's also the spirit of this particular report this year. Next slide, please. Just before we enter in the clue of the report, four announcements for me. One of them is that we are a charity. Everything that we do is provided free of charge to everybody. So if you are in a position to be able to make a donation, please do. And if you want to use your smartphone, we have a fabulous QR code that you can just scan and make a donation. It doesn't matter how small it is. We are just delighted to receive any donation. So thank you if you do. And thank you for all of you that had donated at the last webinar. We had also a very large donation and we were absolutely delighted. So thank you for that. Next slide, please. We'd like you to save a few dates. One is for our end of year forecast. This year will be on the 10th of December at 1 p.m. London time. The diagnostic revolution, are we ready? This year end of year forecast discussion, it will be between myself and Dr. Alireza Atri. So please sign in for that event, which will be live streamed from London. Next slide, please, is please the marker, save the date for the event that we are doing. Next slide, please. At the United Nations General Assembly, there is a side event that will happen next week. We now know that it will be in the presence of Her Royal Highness Princess Mona Al Hussein of Jordan, but we've also had that Her Royal Highness Queen Silvia of Sweden, Her Majesty Queen Silvia of Sweden will be there with us, which is fantastic. And we've only just had that as well. Also, as Minister Judith Thielen, Minister for Youth Prevention and the Sport in the Netherlands, will also be joined by Minister Budi Sadikin, Minister of Health of Indonesia, but also the Vice Minister of Health of Brazil. And this is something that will please one of our panelists, Maria Aparecida, that is with us today from Brasilia. So please register for the event. There's a handy QR code. The third announcement is about Lyon in 2026. We are going to run in April our global conference. The call for abstract is open now. So please do join if you can, as in Lyon. We are now still having people joining us. We are at 580, I think, here on my screen. But alas, we have finished the time for housekeeping. We are going to go into the core of the report. So please, the first slide on the report. So the World Alzheimer Report 2025 tackles the topic of dementia and Alzheimer rehabilitation. It's a direct extension of the World Alzheimer Report that we had in 2022 on post-diagnostic support, one of which recommendation was that we needed more understanding and more research on rehabilitation, because that obviously was something that seemed to work. So last year we took this and we ran with it. And we appointed at the time the University of Exeter and University of Sydney as the people that would do the vast majority of work on the report. And today we have with us Yu-Hin Jeon that is going to give us a presentation. Sadly, we don't have Professor Linda Clare, but Yu-Hin will tell you a little bit more about that when we come to it. Rehabilitation is a key area within the dementia care continuum, and has historically been underutilized and flown under the radar as a means of care and support for people living with dementia. The report explores the economic evidence for rehabilitation programs, best practices for dementia rehabilitation in lower income setting, and a lot more. It also gives you an idea of how families can be involved. Next slide, please. You can access the World Alzheimer Report right now by scanning this QR code I'm showing to you. So I'll leave you a second to scan the QR code. Next slide, please. So what are the findings of the report? Encouragingly, 65% of current national dementia plans mention rehabilitation. Unfortunately, though, a majority, 75% of WHO member states are still without national plans. So only 16% of total member states have national dementia plans that mention rehabilitation. Rehabilitation should be a right. We call on governments to fully embed rehabilitation for dementia into health policies. This is one of the major funding of the report, and is not at the moment. Rehabilitation should be embraced as part of precision care. With recent scientific advancements, the new dialogue is emerging around precision diagnosing, precision risk reduction, and so it should also be about precision care. So this is something that we are encouraging people to embrace. Next slide, please. As ever with ADI, we like to give you some very simple to understand information about our reports. And good rehabilitation exists on a continuum, and we have created a number of infographics for you. In this one in particular, you can see some of the components of a rehabilitation approach: understanding the individual, identifying goals, creating and implementing the personal rehabilitation plan, and then evaluating progress and updating the rehabilitation plan. And our speakers will tell you much more about this in a minute. Jane, please, next slide. SMART goals for dementia rehabilitation are, I am missing one slide. Yes, sorry, I have got my right slide. That we need more implementation, research, and evaluation. We, as an emerging field, we need implementation or research that evaluates the benefit of integrating rehabilitation. This is because organizations like us need to persuade government that it has to be integrated in healthcare system. We need to measure economic impact. This is needed alongside further research for that. There isn't really a lot of evidence for that. Quality of life and aging well don't have to be a luxury. We need to normalize rehabilitation and encourage governments to invest in healthcare systems that integrate rehabilitation as part of the regular care pathway. Next slide, please. And we must actively include the carers in the rehabilitation process. Effective rehabilitation has the capacity to improve the well-being and carer, their caregiver experience. An essential actor in the dementia journey, the carer should be educated on the benefits, principle, and the importance of rehabilitation. Next slide, please. So again, we have prepared a small infographic for you to understand a little bit more about the rehabilitation journey. So you define one's goals, and that sort of breaks down in a number of activities, like focusing on the impact of the cognitive challenges on everyday functioning. And then you work collaboratively with rehabilitation practitioners that can include occupational therapists, speech and language therapists, physiotherapists, geriatrician, etc. And then you need to involve one support network. So family, friends, neighbors, home carers, they're all absolutely critical to this journey. And eventually the person will progress towards their goal. Next slide, please. There are SMART goals for dementia rehabilitation, and these have to be specific, as we know. For example, I will walk to the newsagent every day to buy my daily paper. They have to be measurable. I will remember the names of all the people in my club, for example. They have to be achievable. A goal to visit the library once a week may be unattainable, for example, if it's too far away. They have to be relevant. Getting to know the person is essential to understand their priorities and what brings joys to their life. And they have to be time bound. Goal with a defined time frame create a sense of purpose and accountability to achieve the goal. The final slide should have given you some key pointers from ADI, 3 key takeaways. So in the absence of the slide, these are the 3 bullet points that matter. Rehabilitation is particularly important right now, as not everyone is eligible for the new therapies and they're not available to everyone in the world. Rehabilitation has the capacity to improve quality of life for people living with dementia and carers, have people stay in their own environment for longer, and delay admission to residential care. And the third one and final one is rehabilitation is available in other healthcare area as a given. Think of heart disease or respiratory diseases, but not in dementia, and it should be. It should form part of standard post-diagnostic support, but it also needs to be tailored to the individual and to their specific diagnosis. Precise diagnosis is key to rehabilitation working at its best. So in the meantime, we are well over 600 people online. So I am now delighted to introduce you to our panel. And Professor Linda Clare, as I said, will not be with us, but Professor Yoon-hee John is, and she is Susan Inisa Kwakil Professor of Healthy Aging at University of Sydney School of Nursing and Midwifery. And then John Quinn, who is a dementia advocate, will join us from Brisbane by video. Because John had to go to bed early, it's quite late in Australia, we will then be joined by his carer and wife, Glenys Petrie. And then we are going to have Jackie Poole that is joining us from the UK, who will make an intervention. And last but not least, Professor Maria Aparecida Camargos Bicaglio is joining us from Brazil, and hers will be the last intervention. So just to remind you, please put your question for our panel in the Q&A, and hopefully we will have time for a full discussion full of questions at the end of this presentation. So without further ado, I cede the floor to Professor Yoon-hee John. Yoon-hee, over to you.
Thank you. I hope you can see my slide. Great,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you, Paula. We are incredibly grateful to ADI for their visionary leadership and commitment to recognizing the urgent need for a global conversation about dementia rehabilitation through this World Alzheimer Report. Linda and I have had the privilege of collaborating on this landmark report for the last 10 months. Linda sends her sincere apologies for not being able to join the webinar in person today as she is traveling with no internet access. In the next 15 minutes or so, a recording from Linda will cover what dementia rehabilitation is, followed by my talk on its implementation.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about how rehabilitation can help us take dementia care to the next level. So what is rehabilitation? Well, this is how the World Health Organization describes rehabilitation and its role in healthcare. Rehabilitation addresses the impact of a health condition on a person's everyday life by optimizing their functioning and reducing their experience of disability. Anyone may need rehabilitation at some point in their lives. Rehabilitation is an essential part of the healthcare spectrum. And for people experiencing some forms of disability, it is an established and accepted service they can access. Indeed, under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, people experiencing disability have a right to rehabilitation. People with dementia, however, rarely have access to rehabilitation, despite evidence that they can benefit from it. And this report aims to address this inequality. So why is rehabilitation relevant for people with dementia? Well, rehabilitation aims to improve everyday functioning, activity and participation. So what could possibly be more relevant for people with dementia? We have over 55 million people worldwide living with the condition, and all of them experience challenges to functioning as a result. Many, especially those in older age groups, also have other health conditions, physical challenges or frailties that make it harder to stay active and participate in everyday life. And this means there's vast potential to benefit from rehabilitation and vast need for access to it. We tend to think and talk about dementia mainly in terms of changes in cognitive abilities. But as cognitive abilities change, so does the ability to function and participate in everyday life. And these changes in ability to function have a profound impact and are closely linked to reductions in well-being. The figure shows how as functionability worsens from best level on the left to poorest on the right, so does the way people with dementia perceive their quality of life, satisfaction with life and well-being. And as you can see, the scores on measures of those three constructs decline as functional ability worsens. How can dementia rehabilitation make a difference? Well, dementia rehabilitation is personalized, goal-oriented and collaborative. So the person and others involved, such as family members or care staff, work with the practitioner or rehabilitation team to identify and attain functional goals that are important to the person. So the person with dementia is an active partner. Rehabilitation is not about doing for, but about doing with. Rehabilitation enables people with dementia to function better in the targeted areas, and we have very good evidence for this. Longer-term effects include reduced disability and more time spent at home before moving into residential care. So in this figure on the right from the ENTA3 trial, the top line, the brown line, shows that people with dementia receiving cognitive rehabilitation remained at home longer, on average 6 months longer, before moving into a residential care home than those receiving usual care or the more typically offered group interventions, in this case, cognitive training or reminiscence. So rehabilitation is a personalized approach, and it centers on each individual's rehabilitation plan. So the process of rehabilitation starts with an holistic assessment that includes exploration of the person's priorities, wishes, strengths, and abilities. And this leads to creation of the rehabilitation plan, which is centered on collaboratively selected rehabilitation goals. So that gives us a good starting point for thinking about what dementia rehabilitation involves in practice. Rehabilitation goals describe specific actions or behaviours that are within or potentially within the person's capability and the time frame in which the action will be done successfully. These goals are SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And SMART rehabilitation goals are usually addressed collaboratively through a series of tailored individual sessions with a rehabilitation practitioner. The practitioner offers practical, evidence-based rehabilitation strategies to support goal attainment. Sometimes existing evidence-based, non-pharmacological individual or group interventions are included in the rehabilitation plan. This may be either to support goal attainment, or to tackle barriers that hinder progress in rehabilitation, or to complement the rehabilitation process. And wherever possible, the rehabilitation plan will include family carers or other members of the person's support network. Rehabilitation is an ongoing journey, and the rehabilitation plan is adapted as goals and needs change with the progression of dementia. A person might have periods of more intensive rehabilitation, for example, at times of significant change or transition, interspersed with periods where only ongoing monitoring is needed. So what kinds of challenges does rehabilitation address? Well, the focus will depend on what the person needs and wants, and the principles of rehabilitation can be applied in various ways across settings and stages of dementia. So, for example, as I've listed here on the left, rehabilitation may address the impact of cognitive changes on specific aspects of functioning, for example, memory or problem solving, where rehabilitation strategies are available to help. And here the person may work with one practitioner. It might be an occupational therapist, speech and language therapist, physiotherapist, or psychologist. Some people have a range of complex health needs. We know that many people with dementia also face other health challenges. And for people in this situation, involvement of a multidisciplinary team can allow for a range of goals to be addressed by practitioners with different skills working together to support the person to function as well as possible. Then people with dementia, like everyone else, suffer physical illness or injury, and recovery is promoted by rehabilitation. People with dementia can benefit and regain function with the right approach, and they have equal right to do that. So you'll find examples of these, each of these approaches in the report. It's also important to say that people who are experiencing the earlier stages of dementia with the support of family or friends may be able to set their own rehabilitation goals and plan how to work on them. You will also find some inspirational examples of this in the report, where in the absence of rehabilitation services, people living with dementia have developed their own approach. Rehabilitation offers people hope for living with dementia. It supports independence. It helps people to understand the strategies that they can use to manage problems that come up. And it can make a big difference to daily life through the goals being meaningful to the person and relevant. So in summary, rehabilitation is a powerful restorative experience and provides a vehicle for taking dementia care to the next level. We can think about this like the emerging concept of precision medicine. We could think of rehabilitation as meaning that we're implementing precision care that's tailored to the needs of the individual and most likely to be effective. And this can be done in any setting and at any stage of dementia. Rehabilitation is a practical demonstration of how to put person-centered principles into practice in a fully personalized approach. Through this rehabilitation practice of identifying functional goals and working to attain those goals, to improve functioning, support independence, and build on a person's strengths, as well as finding ways to compensate for difficulties. Many of the building blocks to make rehabilitation available are in place. We have evidence, we have knowledge, and we have skills. Yet people with dementia rarely have access to rehabilitation.
So in the next slides, I'm going to talk about implementing rehabilitation. So in our report, we emphasize implementing rehabilitation is the next level of good care. At its core, rehabilitation is person-centered and focuses on improving the person's day-to-day functioning. In preparing this report, we've drawn from the latest evidence on dementia rehabilitation, expert views, and case studies across world regions. Rehabilitation is grounded in the understanding that disability and associated challenges can be addressed by enabling people to function optimally through proven strategies and methods in the context of their health and capability. Here, the focus is on working collaboratively with the person to strengthen what the person can do while addressing the very challenge that's disabling them. These principles can be flexibly applied to address different types of needs at various stages of dementia for people with various types of dementia and in various settings, for example, home, hospital, clinic or day center, and care home. Ideally, the diagnosis of dementia should mark the beginning of rehabilitation through appropriate channels and referrals from a diagnostician. There are various rehabilitation options that could be introduced in routine practice following a diagnosis of dementia. But rehabilitative care can be introduced at any stage of dementia, providing that it is tailored to the individual's needs, wishes, and goals, and that the evaluation outcome of rehabilitation aligns with the targeted area of function. As you can see from this chart, rehabilitation pathways are diverse and can be iterative. The first step of rehabilitation implementation is understanding the person's context, where the person is in their progression of dementia or type of dementia, their socio-demographic background, personal resources, and support, as well as community environment. As Linda mentioned earlier, rehabilitation can be self-directed, offered by a single practitioner, where the focus is on addressing aspects of cognitive disabilities affecting daily functioning, but often needs to be multidisciplinary and ideally interdisciplinary, as dementia progresses and coexisting health and physical issues become more prominent in the person's day-to-day living. The role of the care partner is enabling the person with dementia to achieve their goals in a supportive manner in collaboration with the rehabilitation practitioner, not taking over. Importantly, for those people with dementia living alone without support from a primary carer, the absence of a carer needs to be carefully considered throughout the rehabilitation process. What do you already know? Research has consistently shown that personalized care approaches and non-pharmacological interventions can enable people with dementia to do the things they want and need to do, to feel more confident, and to be as independent as they can be and wish to be. Growing evidence suggests that multi-component rehabilitation programs improve functional independence among people with mild to moderate dementia. Implementation studies of rehabilitation models have shown promising results, and we also see economic benefits of rehabilitation, although the evidence is limited in these areas. Rehabilitation is gaining global momentum through the WHO's Rehabilitation 2030 initiative and the Lancet Commission on New Rehabilitation, where Linda and I are commissioners focusing on dementia rehabilitation. While access to rehabilitation is mostly limited to local contexts, there are clear pathways through which rehabilitation can be in place as a routine service after the diagnosis of dementia. Japan and Malta lead this field, providing a multidisciplinary rehabilitation program integrated into mainstream geriatric or rehabilitation services. South Korea's home loan program is a combination of individualized rehabilitation training and home-based rehabilitation for people with the early stages of dementia and carers. In Brazil, occupational therapist-led rehabilitation has been offered through university research programs. We'll hear more about this later in this webinar. In Indonesia, Alzheimer's Indonesia provides multidisciplinary home-based rehabilitation in Jakarta. The case study from Togo is in a private clinic setting illustrates how they can lay the groundwork for dementia rehabilitation development in Togo and other countries in a similar position. Are we then ready for dementia rehabilitation? The answer is absolutely yes. Rehabilitation is a collaborative journey, a partnership between the person, the practitioner, and others involved, such as family members or care staff. It is about working together and making choices, doing with rather than doing for or doing to. Of course, there are many actions to scale up rehabilitation, as shown in some of the 10 priority areas set by WHO. These are for rehabilitation across all conditions, not just dementia. Rehabilitation has much to offer people with dementia and their families, but few are able to access it. We must address inequality and inequity in dementia rehabilitation. Society is still too ready to assume that nothing can be done when it comes to dementia, or that the sheer scale of need is simply overwhelming. On the contrary, as we have shown in this report, a great deal can be done from a rehabilitation perspective. So in summary, we know we have sufficient evidence and building blocks for rehabilitation. Resources are always a concern, but rehabilitation can be provided at a relatively modest cost when it is integrated into the existing systems of care. There can be an assumption that what is needed is simply to provide a good care and support quality of life and well-being, for example, by offering curated group activities. In this case, the potential for optimizing functioning on an individual basis is missed. There's a great deal more that can be done if we focus on functioning and apply a rehabilitative approach. We can and also should be more ambitious. Societal readiness for change in dementia care cannot be fully left to those who govern or policymakers. Citizens and others involved in dementia care need the opportunity to participate in the creation of the solution, but also be willing and interested in enabling changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yunhee, for your intervention, and Linda from video for hers, and both of you for working so hard on this report. And at this stage, I should also thank Wendy Widener, who has just left ADI, because Wendy's been also so instrumental to this report. And last but definitely not least, because she's responsible for the report being what it is, Chloe Benoist, who has been working tirelessly night and day to try and make this report not only the wonderful piece of knowledge that it is, but also understandable to everybody. So thank you so much for your hard work. Given I'm at it, I'm also thanking Megan and Jane, who are with me today, running the webinar in the green room. And now, without further ado, I give the floor to John Quinn and Glenys Petrie. We will hear first, I think, a video from John. So Glenys, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I just want to thank everybody for inviting us to be present. And because of the time of the day or night in Brisbane, we've actually done a recording beforehand and watched a video. So if you'd like to start that, thank you very much.
I don't think we have audio. It may just be me, or is everybody having a problem with audio? Everybody's having a problem with audio. Okay. So we will stop this a second whilst the team is sorting this out. And could I suggest then that we go to the presentation of Jackie, because we are a bit late on time. So whilst this audio issue is fixed, I suggest that Jackie Poole, who is a former occupational therapist and dementia rehabilitation advocate, takes over briefly, and Glenys will come back to you as soon as the video issue is resolved. Jackie, do you want to start your presentation?
Yes, please, if you want to share
you.
my slides. Thank you. So as you can see from the title, I'm going to focus on two areas that have already been covered broadly, and I'm going to get a bit more specific about the SMART goal approach and also how we actually implement the cognitive rehabilitation program. So next slide. It's already been said that SMART goals are how they're defined, and they're there again at the title of this slide. And just to say why they are important is, first of all, of course, they direct attention towards personally relevant activities, and therefore they motivate the person and their care partner to keep going with them. because I think it's fair to say they're not for the faint-hearted. There's some work involved in any form of rehabilitation, and this rehabilitation is no different. In order to get that attention and that motivation, it's really important that the goal is very meaningful to the person and it's their choice. And as has been said, it's really important that the care partner is involved right from the start in supporting the person with their goals. Now, in the one of the major studies that I was involved in with Professor Linda Clare, with over 450 people, I supervised and supported the implementation and the therapists who were carrying out the research. And I saw all the goals, and they were very varied. You could see occasionally when there was one that was more probably oriented towards the care partner. I remember one that said, "I will do as my wife tells me," which I guess probably wasn't his goal at all, really, and less motivating. By having a goal, though, what it means is that then the rehabilitation practitioner can then begin to identify the strategies and techniques in order to achieve that goal. And the goal itself really is the 100% of attainment that the person is aiming for and the practitioner is aiming to help them achieve. And once we've got that, then it's possible to break down that goal into attainable stages. So we'll talk a bit more about that later, but it's those attainable stages that help us to then identify when the person has achieved their entire goal or part of it, and enables us to evaluate that level of attainment. So on the right there, you can see there is a broad and vague goal of remembering past events, but then that has been reframed into a much more smart goal with all those different elements as part of it. And what it actually says then, this is a real goal from somebody I was supporting pretty recently, actually, where they wanted to be able to converse with family. And they'd lost their confidence, they'd lost because they couldn't remember what they'd done during the day and they didn't feel as though they had anything to say. So it began with a smart goal of writing things down, keeping a diary with 3 things and doing that every day. So to make that attainable and into stages, what we could do, and did do in this case, was to have different percentages. So if that's the 100% goal, then 25% would have been on one day, on Wednesdays, I will do this. 50% would have been Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and 75% would be all the weekdays. And then 100% is every day. Could have been easier. We could have had 4 things, and then we could have just gone with the quantity and said, every day I'll write down 1 thing, and then 50% would be 2 things, and so on. So there's different ways that you can identify those attainable stages. We used the Bangor goal setting interview to identify the SMART goals and to find and tune the attainable stages, and that link to that Bangor goal setting, BGSI, is on this slide for you when you get the report at the end. Next slide, please. So we've talked also about the rehabilitation process, and you've seen that. Next slide, please. In the maybe we haven't got the next slide, I'll carry on. So we've had how the rehabilitation, here we go, process works actually for pretty much any type of rehabilitation, but I'm here looking at it specifically around cognitive rehabilitation. I don't know about you, but I've got 2 slides overshadowing each other here. Hopefully you'll be able to see it better when you get it. Oh, there we go. Thank you. So in assessment, of course, we need to know what the cognitive difficulties are, but we also need to know the cognitive abilities in order to draw on those. We need to understand the person's emotional states, their physical health, their social support, and their motivation levels. And that has to come before we then plan what the cognitive rehabilitation process is going to look like. It's very important at the beginning. The plan then goes into those goals, the personal goals and the attainment stages, and we'll begin to identify whether we're going to use compensatory or restorative strategies as cognitive rehabilitation techniques. Could you go back to the previous slide, please, just to help us see that? And of course, the plan also needs to include emotional support. Thank you. Implementing in terms of the Great Cognitive Rehabilitation Programme, which I was involved in the study, we found that 6 one-hour-a-week sessions with the rehabilitation practitioner, combined with homework, which went a lot better if there was a care partner to support and motivate the person, we could then enable the person to follow their plan, implementing errorless learning and effortful processing and expanding rehearsal as the 3 core elements really of cognitive rehabilitation. Errorless learning is helping the person to not learn the wrong thing but learn the right thing by presenting it only in that way. Effortful processing involves helping the person to process the information or the action through more than one part of their brain. So saying, reading, doing, for example, and writing. And expanding rehearsal is practicing over expanding periods of time until the person has rehearsed long enough for it to become embedded as a new action or as a new recall of information. Evaluation, of course, can be through the goal attainment levels that I've already mentioned, but there are lots of other measures that can be used, and I've put some of those on here, and I've given you links to 2 of those that are actually free to download that will be helpful to you. And as has been said before, it's important to think about not only once following the evaluation, perhaps revising the plan if it's not working quite well, but also discharging if the person has actually achieved. And the last slide, which I'm going to leave you with, because I know I've gone over time, is just showing how the cognitive rehabilitation strategies, on the final slide, please, can actually be broken down into those that help the person with actions and activity, or those that help the person with information, new learning, or relearning old information, such as remembering people's names.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Super interesting getting deeper into the issue of SMART goals. Now, there is a lot of very interesting questions. And so I really want to be able to give some time at the end for some of them. But now the video of Glenys is actually working. So we are going to go straight to that. Glenys, back to you and to the video.
15 years ago, at the age of 59, I was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, believed to be of the familiar type. Because of difficulties that I was experiencing performing everyday tasks, I was forced to leave my position as a school principal in 2008. It took 2 years before I received a correct diagnosis from a neurologist who reflected on both the diagnostic assessments to date and my family history. He felt that a significant factor in the lateness of my referral to him was, firstly, my age of 51 when initial symptoms surfaced, and secondly, that because I had continued running numerous half marathons, I didn't fit the typical stereotype of a person living with dementia. My primary symptoms included issues with executive function, processing, and communication. My neurologist later also diagnosed me with the sensory challenges of dementia, particularly affecting my vision, hearing, and touch. Following my diagnosis, I became depressed. Glenys noticed that I disengaged from life, staring at 4 walls for a number of years. However, through this period of depression and apathy, I always knew that I had Glenys's unconditional love and support. Together, we were able to use our backgrounds in education and our mindsets of well-being to focus on my passions and our skills to incorporate well-being principles into my life.
At the time of John's diagnosis, care for someone diagnosed with dementia was viewed predominantly through a biomedical, deficit-based lens where the care was focused ostensibly on the pathology of the disease, with the expectation that the gradual decline of a person's physiological and cognitive functions would inevitably lead to a diminution of a person's quality of life, then complete dependency, and ultimately to death. As people can imagine, this care pathway provided no hope at all. Together, we decided to include rehabilitation interventions to help John continue what he'd always enjoyed doing, which was physical activity and educating young people. I've always believed that with the right mindset, support and knowledge, a person can live well with any unexpected life challenges. After all, neither of us had anything to lose by adopting this approach.
Soon I began to focus on me as a person instead of on the diagnosis. I reconnected with family, friends, and the community, whilst participating in things that I found meaningful. I maintained wellness through a healthy diet. Psychologically, I'd established my autonomy and, importantly, no longer felt like just another statistic. I undertook my own searches about what I needed to introduce, with the result being my names: N for nutrition and hydration, A for attitude, acceptance and art therapy, M for mental activities, music and meditation, E for exercise, enjoyment and ecotherapy, and S for social engagement, support, sleep and setting goals. We were both aware that the goals would need to be reviewed and reset as my dementia symptoms evolved, and that it was imperative to continue to work as a team to support each other. My neurologist encourages me to continue with this positive focus and attributes the slow progression of my dementia to the across-the-board strategies designed to optimize physical, cognitive, social, and healthy functioning, rather than only addressing one aspect.
We soon met others living with younger onset dementia known as YOD. Throughout this learning process and John's newly found vigour and energy, we continued to make adjustments. Strategies developed and evolved through discussions with fellow advocates, allied health professionals, and John's neurologist. I knew that allied health professionals have specific and relevant knowledge that leads to further learnings, including information about assistive technology. We both made adaptations to the way we travelled to present at conferences. For example, we learned about wheelchair assist and also the quiet rooms at airports and at the conference themselves. In London, we actually had a practice bus trip from the city to the airport the day before we travelled. And we always made sure that when we arrived at our destination, we allowed extra time for John to recover from the sensory overload of travel. The day of travel was just that, the day we travelled. Nothing else mattered. Confusion can occur at any time of the day, so we always endeavour to access cafes and enabling environmental principles to minimise the overload and the stimuli.
About 4 years post-diagnosis, Glenys was becoming increasingly concerned about my driving when I was independently out and about in the neighbourhood, and also for the safety of pedestrians and other drivers. Together we brainstormed and developed a range of strategies, starting with an occupational therapist's complex assessment that involved perception and thinking skills. Because I was allowed to drive with many restrictions, Glenys asked whether I'd consider buying a bicycle. I'd never owned a bike before. I began to cycle to my mate's place for a lift to the nearby pool for water running and my 2-kilometre swims. I also cycled to different friends' homes for a cuppa and to my weekly Spanish lessons. Riding a bike is definitely a cognitive challenge, but it was an ideal transition to maintain my independence. My advocacy provided me with the opportunity to raise awareness, including with students at schools and universities, with the bonus being that it too is a form of cognitive rehabilitation. I felt valued and was able to reframe my role as an educator. With support, I participated in a number of fundraising activities, some of which included running the Great Wall of China Half Marathon, walk the Camino, and cycle through Vietnam and Cambodia. Also, weekly physiotherapy sessions also provides me to maintain my core strength.
I've continued to engage occupational therapists when John had major issues with our gas stove, and we now have an induction stove top. Reflecting on John's driving issues, when I suggested him buy a bicycle, he was like a kid in a lolly shop and his whole face lit up. It was just marvellous. But John also had difficulties with the genre of recipes. Therefore, I rewrote them to integrate ingredients with the method. We've incorporated enabling environment principles to modify both our bathroom and our kitchen and added things other than just colour contrast, personalised it and had good line of sight. By incorporating John's names into mine and therefore our lives, we recognise the benefits to his well-being and happiness, and as well as heart and brain health. Balance is vital. Exercise, sufficient sleep, good diet, water, social activities, advocacy, etc. How much he does or doesn't do has an accumulative effect on his cognitive tiredness. We consciously plan and review real-life, meaningful goals for John to maintain his autonomy and independence. Together, we decide on strategies and we adapt accordingly to enrich our lives. After all,
We have nothing to lose.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
everybody. I'd like to add very quickly, I saw some of the feedback in the comments and I was just, my heart opened up, and thank you. It was nice to see some comments from people who we know through our advocacy who live overseas, particularly in the UK. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Glenys and John. I think this video has been so critical, hasn't it? Because there were some comments in the chat before we showed the video about but people want this or people may not want that. But the point is, and I think this is the point of the entire report, there is a need for personalized care here. Everybody needs a different. Everybody's life is different. Everybody wants a different. And the story of Glenys and John tells you one story, and it's an important story to tell, because in their case, this has been really transformational. And this is why we are doing this report, and this is why we want to bring this whole field of study to a broader knowledge. It's been really interesting to see how little media has been interested in covering the report. Somebody else in the chat is saying that a lot of this is preaching to the converted. That is true. But remember that when ADI gets involved, it's the number of people that will know about this will grow exponentially, because there is just so many more countries involved, so many professionals involved, and so much more public involved. So this is exactly what we are trying to do. We are trying to get more people to be aware of the fact that this can work. So without further ado, because we're running out of time, I am handed over to Professor Maria Aparecida Camargos Bicayo. Maria Aparecida, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here now and to speak at the Autonomy Report 2005 launch. I'd like to thank the ADI for the invitation. The next slide, please. Next slide, please. Brazil has one of the largest universal public health care system of the world, called the Sistema Único de Saúde, SUS. Brazil also has a rapidly aging population. Today, we have about 32 million of people older than 60 years, which corresponds to 16% of the total population. SUS, our public health system, is responsible for diagnosis and care of people with dementia and their families in Brazil. However, in Brazil, access to specialized dementia servers remains limited and to big centers and large hospitals and universities. The universities, like Federal University of Minas Gerais, where UFMG, where I work, have extension programs which play a role by offering professional training, education, and free services aligned with SUS. These programs are typically driven by postgraduate research and depend on volunteer professionals and students providing model approaches. UFMG has extension program called PROEPSI, and the co-aging cohort study group involved in diagnosis and care of people with dementia. The UFMG also has a reference center for healthcare of older adults. Next slide, please. Next slide. I will present Mr. John case to illustrate the rehabilitation job at this program. Mr. John is a 77-year-old married retired man. His education level is only elementary school. He was diagnosed with late onset Alzheimer's disease dementia initial phase. He has experienced worsening memory and problem-solving abilities for 2 years, which has impaired his abilities to perform daily tasks. He also has behavioral psychological symptoms of dementia, characterized by agitation, aggression, irritability, anxiety, depression, and insomnia. His wife is his main care, followed by his daughter. The treatment of Mr. John was based on medication and personalized care plan focused on his specific needs. Next slide, please. Mr. John began the rehabilitation journey based on his daily activities, personal history. Please, next slide. Routines, abilities, and environment. First, he began individual sections to stimulate real-life tasks related to activities of daily living. And then he joined group therapy to reconnect him to his role as spiritual guide and to improve his interactions with others. At the same time, his wife joined the group to support cares and families of people with dementia. Next slide, please. In the next slide, we can see Mr. John in his individual section. We can see he working with photographies, pictures, games, and some tips to help him with activities of daily living. Next slide. In this slide, we can see we have a space for activities related to domestic skills, domestic activities. But Mr. John doesn't have his activities in this space, but we have this space in our center. Next slide, please. And here we can see the group therapy, which helped Mr. John to improve interactions with others. As a result of all this therapy, Mr. John became more independent, interested in doing some activities, helping his wife to take care of house and garden. By the other side, Mary was able to focus on her well-being, learned new ways to manage her daily activities, and felt less stressed than before. Next slide. In conclusion, in university extension and outreach programs, this kind of multimodal activity, person-centered rehabilitation approach rely on postgraduate research and the support of volunteer professionals. The extension and outreach programs have provided care and support for people living with dementia and their caregivers. These programs make it possible to provide high-quality rehabilitation in places and countries where resources are scarce. Adequate funding is still needed to retain qualified staff, expand this initiative to other centers, and strengthen integration with referral and counter-referral systems between primary and specialized or secondary and tertiary care, especially in our countries. That's all. finished.
Thank you so much, Maria Aparecida. Lots of lovely feedback for you too into the chat. So thank you. Now we have about 10 minutes for Q&A, and I really want to get into that. There is a couple of things I want to pick up at the very beginning, so we are not going to focus too much onto them. One is relating to the need for more evidence. And as we say in the recommendation from the report, one thing that is very clear from what we have found out in the report, we need more evidence base. And we need more evidence base at scale. A lot of the projects that have been used as a reference point are quite small. And of course, when we, ADI, goes to governments and ask for something to happen, we need to have our figures at hand, because of course the first question we are asked is this cost effective? And so part of the work we've done with the report authors has been to try and find answers to that, and we have all agreed that we do need more information. The other is, for those of you that are worrying about semantics, there is a lot about re-enable stroke rehabilitation and other questions alongside that. Bear in mind that ADI doesn't just work in English. We are an international organization. We work in over 60 languages. With that in mind, sometimes what works in one language doesn't mean anything in another language. So we try as much as possible to adopt terms that everybody can understand easily and that are not too much suffused by jargon. They may not be the correct terms, but we encourage our member association in the individual countries, obviously, to localize those terms in a way that for the local people, they make more sense. So I just want to say we're not ignoring those questions. They are important. But in the context of an organization that also works in Chinese or in Arabic or in Spanish, is not necessarily the primary focus of the report. Now, I will want to start with one question that has intrigued me, and I would direct it to Yoon Hee, but also Jackie may want to come in and speak about this. There is a question from Marco Stampini that says, people who receive rehabilitation delay institutionalization by 6 months. Question, for how many months on average did they receive rehabilitation? Yoon Hee.
So if we look at major trials that offer rehabilitation programs, and they often use about 3 to 4 months of rehabilitation as an intervention period. And that was certainly the case in our trial interdisciplinary home-based rehabilitation program. And it also depends on the baseline of that person's condition at the baseline. If the person has more progressed, they're less likely to stay home longer. So it varies, but I think that 6 months is based on the cognitive rehabilitation that actually led to 6 months delay in institutionalization, whereas in our trial, 4 months program that also delayed the institutionalization or completely prevented people from going into the care home.
So that's a very good answer. Jackie.
Yes, in the Great Cognitive Rehabilitation Trial, we used research therapists, and the trial was to deliver once a week for 12 weeks sessions, but then we followed on with 6 once-a-month sessions because we wanted to see how well the effects were maintained. What we actually found at the end of that study was that people began to improve within 6 sessions. So in the second trial, which was called Great Into Practice, which was funded by Alzheimer's Society, we purely did, that was with actual real life practitioners rather than research therapists. And we found that 6 sessions was quite enough so we just did 6 one hour a week sessions, but added to that the homework of practicing in between whiles. And we found that had the same impact.
Lovely. Thank you, Jackie. I'll move to the next question.
Paula,
Yes.
Paula, may I just add, what we found most important is the timely intervention. So it was effective only when we delivered rehabilitation in the mild stages of dementia. So it's really critical that timely intervention is of
Thanks, Yuhin. And that actually had come out in another question, so you've answered that as well. It's interesting how both in the case of rehabilitation and in the case of disease-modifying therapies, timely intervention is absolutely critical. So this brings us back to the issue of diagnosis. We need to have correct diagnosis. The report goes in some detail about what people can expect according to their diagnosis. There are several forms of condition and diseases that lead to dementia, not just one. So we do need to know what is likely to happen, what the development is going to be. And we received so many reports of diagnoses that are not done at all, and also of false diagnosis. So to have a diagnosis timely is critical. To have the right diagnosis is critical. So we need all to work more about that. That's why we're going to pick up diagnosis in December at the end of year forecast and in other webinars as well. Jackie?
Yes, just to add to that, if I may, with the Great Into Practice trial, we did actually include some care homes, 4 care homes, and worked with people with more moderate dementia. And what we found was, which was on one of my slides, that people with earlier stages, lesser impact of dementia, could learn information, but people even at a moderate level could relearn or learn new ways of doing actions. And so, you know, even I would say into moderate dementia, people would benefit. But if it's too early, if these days we're looking at very early diagnosis, if there are no symptoms, I think the person is less likely to be motivated to engage.
I think that's such a good point because, of course, what also comes so strongly from the report that the motivation of the person and the support of the family, and looking at Glenys here, is so critical to them to succeed. You need to be motivated. As I write myself into introduction of the report, I believe in rehabilitation because I benefited from it for other conditions, and to be motivated and to have family support was critical. And somebody in the questions is saying, what happens if you're alone? And indeed, what happens if you're alone? Can I ask some of you if you have experience of people that have to go through this journey alone without a family?
We have a lot of people living with dementia in Brazil that live alone without family. And sometimes our intervention is when he is able to go to, they are able to go to our center, we can begin the rehabilitation and begin the treatment close to the primary care. We have primary care centers, healthcare centers, close to communities. So we work together to rehabilitate and to treat this person. And because many times we can't, they can't have other people to take care of them. Sometimes the environment can, the people, the neighborhood can help him, but our primary care system, our healthcare primary care system helps them a lot, and we work together to rehabilitate them. We have a lot of people living with dementia and who live together alone.
Alone. Can I hand over to Glenys, who's put her hand up?
Just very quickly, it can be very complex in many situations that I know personally of, where a person living with dementia is actually the carer for somebody else with a different health issue. And secondly, I also know of some family members where there's a husband and a wife and no children living at home because they're adults. However, the spouse isn't interested. And so they may live in a family unit, but they don't have support. And that's so sad too. It can be very complex, can't it?
I think for me, having come to Alzheimer's and dementia through the route of dementia-friendly communities now, it sort of points out to how important it is to create a community that is supportive, because there could be someone around you that is perfectly happy to help, but you have to know about them and they need to know about you. And so this is in part why we have been so strong following the example of Japan and then the UK picking it up, sort of promoting the concept of dementia-friendly community. I just want to pick up one question. We have 1 minute, so it's going to be a very quick answer. Can we discuss goals in terms of maintaining meaningful social activities outside the home, including social relationship with personal friends outside the home? Sometimes shame and stigma in the person, or often others who see differences in the person they know, can avoid maintaining important social relationship. Maybe the area is prevention of disability post-diagnosis, or even avoiding diagnosis to prevent agitation in the person and associated disability. I know it's a complicated question, but it's directly related to what? Yes, Jackie.
Yes, I mean, it's a very good question. And I think a lot of the goals often do relate to some form of social inclusion. And there can be many reasons why somebody doesn't get that social inclusion, either because of loss of confidence, loss of being able to remember people's names. So the goal is often to remember people's names in order that somebody can go out back into their social group again, or be able to use a bus to be able to travel to where that social activity takes place. So often the end goal, which has been broken down into little component parts, will be a social activity.
Fantastic way to close our webinar. I've just noticed somebody put a question about anosognosia. Yes, we did deal with that in the report in 2021 on diagnosis. It's always worth reading ADI reports. They remain valid for at least 10 years after they're published. So thank you to my panelists. Thank you to all of you, the hundreds of you that have been on this webinar and that made us feel the love, interest, passion, and fabulous motivation to follow on to this subject. It makes me even more strongly believe that we did the right thing by publishing this report. I hope it will be helpful to you, if you're a professional, if you're a carer, if you're a researcher, all those kind of categories that we saw at the beginning. I thanks a lot again, John and Linda sent video, and nothing, lots of love to all of you to have participated to this webinar. We'll see you soon. Please join us for the UN. We need the community to support us. Dementia is still the Cinderella, and also many of you are saying, what can we do to change? We can do things to change. We can go to the UN. Now, dementia is formally in the declaration, but we need to keep it there, and we need government to take it seriously, and they still don't. So please join us next week in New York. I know it's a strange time of the day, but that's how it is with the UN. And please, if you cannot follow it, do something about it, tweet it, reshare it. Let's make sure that dementia stops being marginalized as it has been for so many years. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.